What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 1988 Porsche 911 Carrera. Today on the Carrera behind me, we are going to be covering how to replace your front brakes. In front of me, we have one of the comprehensive kits available on fcpo.com, which includes everything you need to service all four corners of the vehicle. The only thing we have added separately to this kit is the hardware for the front discs. This is to mount the discs to the hub assemblies on the front of the 911. For today's video, we're just going to be focusing on the front brakes. So if you want to check out the rears, be sure to check that video as well. That's going to be linked in the video description below, so you don't have to go searching too far for it. But we're going to focus on the fronts today. We have some servo rotors, we have some rotor pads, we have some Motul brake fluid, which we're going to be doing once we install these stainless steel Goodrich lines. So these will be a nice upgrade for the car, and with the rotor pads, it should give us some really nice biting power so we can do some spirited driving. Typically, these can last anywhere from 30 to 50,000 miles. On these more classic cars, what you tend to run into is the hardware and the pads just being old from lack of use, to be quite honest. Unless you're tracking your 911, then you're going to be pretty familiar with replacing the pads, but this should cover everything you need to know. And before we get started on that, let's take a look at some of the tools you're going to need for this DIY. For this job, we're going to be using a 3/8 drive ratchet, a torque wrench, a couple of wrenches. Some of them are going to be duplicates. 19, we have a 11, a 10. We also have a 14 to counterhold. The 14 may change depending on what's on your vehicle now. This car had a mix of stainless steel lines and soft lines. So we had to use a 19 for the old stainless steel lines, and then the new ones switched over to 14s, which we'll show you later on. A couple pliers here. We have some Knipex. These are going to help us removing the hard lines in the rear from the soft lines. We have a regular set of pliers. We have some pinch-off pliers. These are going to pinch off the overflow line on the master cylinder. We have a hammer, a small brass punch, a 1/4 inch punch. Those are going to be for driving out the pins that hold the pads in place. Sockets wise, we have a couple 19s, just in different sizes, one including for the lug nuts. We have a 10mm socket. We have some Lyle caliper spreader tools here. These are going to be, these pliers are going to come in handy to do the dual pistons on the rear calipers. We have a motive brake bleeder. You're going to need a catch can as well for your brake fluid. Some brake clean comes in handy. The BMW one is usually priced the best. We also have Liqui-Moly 20240. That's the ceramic brake paste that I typically use when we do DIYs. Some impact tools to speed everything up. Then of course some shop towels, because brake fluid is always messy and never fun. Now we know what we're working with. Let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. We're going to be working on the passenger side. However, the steps will be the same for both sides of the vehicle. We have 5 19mm lug nuts to remove. All right, now that we have the wheel off, we have a better view of where we're going to be working. We have our hub, our disc, caliper, pads, brake pad wear sensor. One thing to note before we even get further ahead is you'll notice with the rotor pads we're installing, there's no notches in them for the sensor, so we're going to kind of tie those off to the side. Racetrack pad things, and we have an old stainless steel line. I'm not even quite sure what brand this is. This could be on here for the last 20 years, so our kit comes with new ones from Goodrich, so we're going to be replacing those as well. And whether you want to or not, with these cars, the hard line coming off of the caliper going into either your soft line or stainless steel line, there's real no way to hang these off without bending that line. So you're still going to have to break the hydraulic system either way. So new lines, fresh brake fluid, they'll all be good. Before we go any further, there's two things we want to do. First is going to be to get this cap off. Sometimes it helps to keep the caliper in place so that you can jam a screwdriver through it using the fins on the disc so that you can pry this off. So that's what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to go like that with some towel. You can take the pads off first if you'd like, and then go through the center of the caliper. Either way will be fine. I just have some pliers here with some electrical tape on them so I don't completely gouge up the surface on the cap. And then we're going to set this to a size that will work for us. Bam, baby. Just needs a little percussive persuasion. All right, now, next thing we're going to work on before we go any further is getting our old pads and brake pad wear sensor out. So let's do that now. All right, first we're gonna drive out the pins. I'm using a 1/4-inch punch to drive out the pins on either side. Just be mindful as you drive this out, the spring clip's gonna wanna pop out, and just be mindful of the orientation of said clip. These can be a little bit cruddy sometimes, so using some small pliers to kind of wiggle them out the rest of the way is gonna be your friend. Obviously try not to mar up the caliper, especially if they are painted like these are. You can reuse this hardware, no problem. Just hit it with a little wire wheel, clean it up a little bit, and it'll look great. Obviously, if it's bent or too pitted, then don't reuse them. We're gonna set this stuff to the side for now. Now we have our brake pads. You can see on the inboard pad, that is where you're gonna find your brake pad wear sensor. So we're just gonna pop that one out, and then you can follow that towards the back. This one happens to be zip tied up against the hard line. There's usually a little plastic clip that holds them in place. So we're gonna cut that zip tie off and we're gonna disconnect it. Because we are using the track pads again, technically I could leave this to the side, it's undamaged and it would keep the light from coming on. We're gonna do something similar, but we have new ones that are fresh, and should we go back to a regular, regular street pad, then we can clip them in afterwards and they'll be nice and fresh. So let me cut that off. This will pop out of here, and then you just pull to separate them. And there we go. All right, now before we pull out our pads, we can use the pads to help compress the piston back in on either end. You're gonna take a flathead blade, and again, we're replacing the discs and the pads. If you were only gonna be doing the pads, don't do this as you're gonna mar up the surface of the disc. But in this case, everything's being replaced, so it's not gonna hurt anything. We're gonna take our flathead and try to feed it between the pad and the disc and just start prying at it. Just something like this, just to get started and give us enough of a gap between the rotor and the pad. Pull it out a little bit. Just make sure I'm nice and even on the piston. And then you would do the same thing to the other side. Go back and forth until they're nice and even. The other thing you can do is pull out the pads, and you can see what it does to the pad, which is why you would never do this on something that you're going to be reusing. I'm going to pry out the pad using the flathead. I'm just going to use some towel so I don't mar up the surface on the painted caliper. And then you can take a tool similar to this. This is a dual piston or compressor tool. We're just going to use the ends of it to feed it into the caliper. Okay, and as much as we can, press it, and you can feel it push in those pistons. And that's it. Now, we have two 19 millimeters holding on the caliper, but before we can pull those off, this is a fun part about these older air-cooled cars. I think for the 964s, don't quote me to this, they got a soft line instead of the hard line going to the caliper, so makes life a little bit easier. But we're gonna work on disconnecting the hard line now. We're gonna break it free at both the caliper and the vehicle. We wanna make sure that we can get both ends, otherwise, really there's no point in doing this if A, they're not gonna come off, and B, we're not gonna be able to put the new line on when we do the brake bleed. So I'm gonna soak them with a little bit of penetrating fluid, let them sit for a second, might even clean up the caliper while I let them soak, and then we'll pull it all off. So I'm just wiping down the hub a little bit. We are gonna be transferring this obviously over to our new disc, or we're gonna be slapping a new disc onto it. So cleaning it a little bit now is gonna keep us a little bit cleaner when we start handling it over on the table. As you know, anything with wheel bearings and grease always gets messy no matter how hard you try. So we can save a little bit of effort on this end and keeping this a little bit clean. It'll make our disassembly and assembly a little bit easier. Next, we're gonna break the two 19 millimeters free on the caliper. Again, we still need to do the line, but if the line is gonna come off, then I wanna be able to work quickly, get the caliper off, and minimize how much time the system's gonna be open between the disc swap and then putting the caliper back on and the new hard line. So for now, we're just gonna crack the two 19s. Beautiful, we'll leave it at that. Now let's work on the hardline. The hardline side of things is an 11 mil. This car having aftermarket stainless steel lines. The counterhold is 14, so just keep in mind that can change if you still have soft lines or a different brand of line on there. I'm going to use a line wrench with the 11 to break this free so I don't risk or lessen the chance of stripping the head on this line. All right, that side is broken free. Let's do the other side first before we go any further. This side just happens to be an 18 on these aftermarket lines. Oh yeah, baby. No problem. All right, we should be good there. Yep, there is our stainless steel line. Plug this one up for the time being, just to slow things down a little bit. All right, let's get this caliper off the rest of the way. So this is that clip we're gonna hang on to, so make sure you don't lose that. And for now, we'll just set this baby to the side. Now we have that off, I'm going to take off the rest of the old stainless steel line. We'll get our new one started on the chassis side of things, and then we'll leave it and move on to this baby. We have a clip here that holds this line in place. We're going to pry this out using a flathead screwdriver. There we go. Hang on to this baby. All right, using a longer 11, we're going to remove the rest of this line. Always take your time with these. You don't want to cross thread these, otherwise you're going to have to be cutting and reflaring the line, and that's never fun, especially with all the work that you're already doing. So I can hang out like so. Now we're going to feed that clip back in. Curved side facing away from your soft line or stainless steel line. There's a ridge on the line that this is going to sneak behind, and that's what's going to give it the pressure, if you will, to hold it in place. And I like to give it a couple love taps to seat it the rest of the way. Just don't go too crazy where you're going to start bending the tab that it's mounted on. Beautiful. All right, now that we have that clip back in, we can take this chance to tighten up the line. That's going to hang out. Now let's work on getting this hub and disc assembly out. When you pull this off, there's a 6mm hex here that you have to loosen up first. Sometimes you need a little flathead screwdriver to break this clamp open. Then that'll come off. We have a washer and the outer wheel bearing, so just be mindful you don't want to drop those. It's a great time to check for any existing play. These are pretty tight. This is pretty clean in here. I'm sure someone was in here not too long ago. The brakes were not terribly worn on this, so it's probably, again, more than anything, just age. Otherwise, the bearings like this feel great. We'll take a look at them when we pull it out, but 6mm hex. There is a cutout on the lip of the hub assembly. Just make sure your hex is seated in all the way. The last thing you want to do is strip this, because then you're going to be in a world of hurt. We're going to give this a little bit of a pull forward. That's going to free up our washer and our bearing. So here's our wheel bearing. You can wipe off some of the grease so you can get a better look at it. I mean, this looks to be in great shape. The grease is a little old, but it's not totally wasted. And I mean, the car drove nice before we took it apart, so it should drive nice when we put it back together. Timken bearings, good stuff. I'm going to set this washer to the side, and then I'll show you how we're going to prep the bearing for reassembly now, just so that it's ready to rock when we're done with the disc swap. We have our Liqui grease, and the way I like to treat these is I like to put the end of the bottle basically up into the crevices or the roller bearings, and then just use the tube to basically shove the grease through. But if there's too much old grease in here, you might have to brake clean them to get that stuff out. That can get a little bit hard and make it a little bit hard to feed in the fresh grease. But I can see it starting to come through the bearings, so I think we'll be just fine. And we'll set this baby to the side with our washer. We'll clean up a little bit, but now we can pull this off completely, bring it over to our workbench. We'll show you how to split them. Let's go over to the workbench. All right, we have our new hardware handy. We have 5 13mm bolts and nuts that we're going to be removing. The bolt heads are on the back and the nuts are on the front. So I'm just going to use a 13 on the ratchet on the back side to counterhold, and then zap out the fronts with the impact just to make it a little bit easier. Should be some washers on the nut side of things as well. All 5 came out. Now we're going to split the hub from the disc. These are, like I said, someone either has repainted them or done really good job at taking care of them. So I'm not going to strike them with a hammer, although you can, especially if yours are in bad shape. I'm going to find a split between the face of the disc and the hub and take my flathead screwdriver and just kind of feed it in just to get it started. And then I'll use my hammer to tap it in and start splitting everything apart. That's it, baby. We're going to make sure to clean this up really well. Again, these are in pretty exceptional shape. So we're just going to wipe off all the grime, make that nice and clean. I like to use a little bit of liquid moly ceramic paste to put on the faces here, just to keep the disc from rusting on down the road. We live in New England. I doubt this car will ever see winter, but that doesn't mean that it can't get exposed to elements, especially water and stuff. So just being proactive. Also helps when the discs don't have a coating on them, and I don't believe ours are coated on that specific part of the rotor, so that'll go a long way in the future for the next person that does this brake job. All right, now as best as we can, keeping our hands fairly clean, if not changing our gloves or washing them before we handle our new disc, it's going to go a long way. These are fairly clean. I'm only going to grab it by the cooling fins. We have our R for right passenger side. Line up the bolt holes. Take your time with it. Go nice and easy. If everything's nice and clean, you'll be able to move them enough just to adjust them. And then we'll take our new bolt, feed that through the back. All right, now on the back side, I'm going to switch to the shallow 13. That's why we have a couple of them. And I'm going to counter hold on the back here with this one, flip them over, and then torque down with the longer one on the front. 3-inch extension on the 13. We're going to torque these all to 23 Newton meters. A little bit of torque seal on the top of the nuts will go a long way. Anyone who works on this car next or pulls off a wheel can just take a quick glance, and just nice insurance. Takes 2 seconds to do. And with that situated, it should look something like that. I'm going to wipe off the excess grease on the edges here. I don't need this slinging around while the car's driving around. And then once we have everything nice and mounted, we can worry about wiping off any fingerprints on these discs. These are not coated on the pad surface. They are coated a bit on the inside and the fins, so we'll be more than fine to gently grab them and move them around. So let's head over to the car and I'll meet you over there. We have our backing plate and spindle all cleaned up. I'm going to put a little bit of fresh grease here on the inside so that it can kind of pack in with the wheel bearing and hub assembly once that goes back on. We're just going to snug this back up to how we had it before it came apart. But the golden rule of thumb here is obviously go with your feel, but you want to tighten it to the point where you can just move the washer that's sitting behind it, the one that was between the bearing and the pinch bolt. As long as you can just move it, obviously you don't want any play in the assembly, you're gonna be good. This is probably gonna line back up to where we had it when we took it apart, which if so, will make it nice and easy. I'm gonna use this baby just to snug it up. And then I wanna make sure I can move this bearing a little too tight, or move the washer, I should say. Oh yeah, that is nice, my good people. All right, we're gonna line up our slot, get that 6mm hex in, and then just snug up that pinch bolt. Now we can throw our dust cap back on. It's up to you if you want to pack it with even more grease, but we have quite a bit in here, so I'm not too worried about it. I'm gonna try to get that in as nice and even as possible. You can use a rubber mallet, or if you're gentle with the large BFH, just go nice and easy. You can hear it and feel it once it's bottomed out. All right, now I'm gonna take a moment, put some brake clean on a shop towel and just rotate the disc so we can get the front and the back nice and clean before we slide on the caliper. We have a nice gap on the back here where the caliper lives to reach for the back of the disc. Beautiful. All right, now we can slide on the caliper once more. All right, now we're gonna snug up the 219s by hand, and then we will hit them with the torque wrench. Now we can work on the fun part, which is getting brake fluid all over your hands while you hook up the new stainless steel line to the hard line on the caliper. I can feel the line engaging. So now we're just gonna grab our 11 and start snugging it up. All right, now I'm gonna counter hold on the other side and just same thing, snug it up nicely. 14 to counter hold. Let's get our pads in now. We're almost at the end, so let me grab those. We'll slide those in. We have some new hardware. Pads are gonna go in. I like to put just a little bit of brake paste on the back of these, just so they don't get stuck to the pistons, and maybe it'll seal up against the piston and keep debris and dirt from getting in there. Maybe I'm crazy. You let me know in the comments. And we're gonna punch this one in all the way, just so it stays in place. I'm using a brass punch on the back here. All right, now all we have left is the brake pad wear sensor, which again, these pads do not have a cutout for. So we're just gonna snug them up nicely, hit them with a zip tie so they can live off to the side, and should they ever revert back to standard pads, they have a fresh sensor to rock and roll with. Plug this baby in. All right, they're gonna go in one way, so don't worry about messing it up. Push our connector back in. And it's up to you if you wanted to run them through the clip here on the anti-rattle thing and just kind of let them, sit in there and off to the side. I think it's a little ugly. I think it's gonna risk getting caught on something. So I'm just gonna tuck it back up this way, feed it almost into the front here where the plug clips into. I don't wanna force it in because I don't wanna break these little tabs, but we'll keep it something like that. 2 zip ties should be good. At this point, all we have really left to do would be obviously to slap the wheel back on. The rears are gonna be done on a separate video. We're gonna keep the wheels off as we're gonna bleed all the brakes. Since we have new lines, we're gonna be doing new lines on the rear as well. But wheel back on, 130 Newton meters once it's on the ground, and you're good to rock and roll. If you wanna stay and watch how we bleed the brakes, stay tuned to the very end, which should be in a second, and we'll zap through bleeding all 4 corners on the car. All right, my good people, we're gonna bleed the brakes on the 911 now. There's 2 things. One, we have the motive bleeder hooked up to our reservoir. It's full of fluid. On these cars in particular, there is an overflow line, which comes out the side of the reservoir. We're gonna pinch that off, otherwise we're gonna lose all our pressure and send it out the overflow. So using our pinch off pliers, we're gonna go ahead and pinch off the overflow line. That's gonna keep us from losing any pressure while we pressurize the brake system. Optimal pressure for this is going to be 22 psi on the gauge here on our motive bleeder. So we'll pump it up to about 22, give it a couple minutes, make sure the pressure doesn't start dropping. Since we did all 4 corners in total on this car with stainless steel lines, the chance for a leak is always high. We just messed with the system, we just opened it up. So this will tell us if we have a leak as well as the brake fluid hitting the ground. So let's do that now, and then we're gonna work on the rear right of the car. We're just gonna show you that one corner. It's gonna be the same steps for all 4. You're gonna start with the wheel furthest away from the master and work your way closer. If you wanna see a little more in depth on how to use this motive bleeder, we do have a video which we'll link in the video description below for that. 22 on the money, baby. We're gonna give that a couple minutes, again, making sure that it doesn't drop, and then we're gonna head over to the rear right corner and start bleeding some brakes. All right, at this point, the vehicle's brakes have been bled. Now we're just gonna throw the wheels back on, get around the ground, and torque them up properly. We're gonna torque these to 130 Newton meters in a crisscross pattern. All right, my good people, that is gonna conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a pretty straightforward and rewarding job, but you know, you're breaking the hydraulic system. It can always be a little bit scary or tedious on any car, but the motive bleeder makes it super easy to do it by yourself. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you would like to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.